Hello.
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 Maybe wait a couple. I think we can get started. Okay, so welcome to the May 22nd Upjet Special Interest Group meeting. So this is Alper speaking. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Christian. I work at Genetech, and we've started using Crossplane for a few months now. And the main Upjet provider we're using is provider Azure, but we also created our own based for Cloudflare, basically. So based on Upjet.
That's good. Thank you.
And my name is Marc-André, and I'm a colleague of Christian. I also work at Genetech, so I'm interested to see what's coming up in Upjet.
Oh, just as a context, we're actually working in the platform engineering team at Genetech, so we provide the hosting services for different workloads, and we're trying to automate a lot of things using Crossplane.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, I'm Alper. I'm working at Upbound in the, what we call as the extension team. So the mandate of the extension team is mainly, maintaining the Crossplane extensions like the providers. We are actually maintaining the official providers for AWS, GCP, Azure, and Azure AD, as well as a bunch of others, and Upjet. So this this series of meetings started as Upjet, based on Upjet, but as as you have seen the agenda, we are also covering topics around the option provided from welcome and more. And my colleague Farkut is also working with the extension team. So let me share my screen and can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, so we have some agenda items, and we'd like to talk about some updates from the providers, the Upjet, and also the Uptest, project. And I think you have also added a couple of items that we can discuss later. So let me start by giving some updates from the providers, official providers landscape. So we have an ongoing task of converting, singleton lists to embedded objects. I don't know if you folks are familiar with what's going on here, but we have, the underlying Terraform providers use lists with, a magnitude constraint of one to represent embedded objects, basically. And, we have so far reflected this, generate the APIs, but, it's not the best user experience that you can have, an embedded object you would expect, but you see in this. And unfortunately, we are not generating the, validation tool that is allow you to provide multiple items in a list. So the first item here, the single is to embedded object API conversion is about, converting the single list used to next item constraint of one into embedded object. So far, we have delivered, we have released these changes in provider Azure AD and GCP. And I see Fatih has added provider Azure also here, so it means that, the release process runs well. And, across these three providers, including provider Azure, we have made this change. The ongoing task is to, have these changes rolled out for provider AWS also. When doing so, in the official provider repository, we maintain a bunch of example manifests. And, these example manifests are used for testing the resources as well as they are published in the Upbound marketplace. So that, you have an example of how to use these managed resources. But, since these are manually maintained, we needed a utility to convert these manually ordered example manifest in the context of this, single things to embedded object conversion. And, we have extended Upjet. We have added a utility library in Upjet to facilitate this. And, you can see an example in the supplied link in item 3 here. If you have providers and you'd like to convert, the single keys, the embedded objects in your object-based providers, and if you have manual manifests, and if the number is high, so that you'd like to automate the process of this conversion, you can take a look at how we did it for provider Azure. There's also, a hiccup here that we encountered while testing our resources. It turns out that, in the official providers, we are using the JSON schema during the code generation phase. And in the runtime, we are using the underlying Go schema. So we have recently switched to a new architecture that's more performant in object-based, official providers. And, under this new architecture, we are utilizing the Go schema. However, in order to, make this change backwards compatible, as a workaround, we are still using the JSON Terraform schema. And, we have observed some inconsistencies, in the JSON schema. Certain resources do not have the max items constraint set to 1. Whereas, the corresponding Go schema, specifies a max items set to 1. So because of this inconsistency, at runtime, you encounter errors because, the runtime thinks that it needs to convert from an embedded object to a single key list, whereas the underlying CRD still declares a single list. So because of this inconsistency, we have observed some failing tests, etc. And if this also happens to be case in your provider, and if you also convert the single list into embedded objects, you can take a look at this reference PR to see an example, how to do this correction. This is probably, by the way, specific to the official providers, and listen, very unlikely that you will encounter a similar situation if you do the conversion. But I included this example so that if you hit this issue, you can see the steps you need to take to resolve it. So the second item is regarding our ongoing task of implementing provider config tests for the official AWS provider. So for those who do not have the context, we are implementing a bunch of end-to-end tests, to validate the provider configs across the official providers. So this is not specific, this work stream is not specific to the AWS provider, but we started with the AWS provider. And we shared some updates regarding this, in the previous meeting. I think Erhan is going to open a pull request to introduce these tests soon for provider AWS. Another item that you would like to mention is that we are introducing, an active MQ broker user resource as a standalone resource in the official AWS provider. Normally, we don't cover, resource additions in the meeting. However, related to this work stream, we need to introduce, two sets of changes into Upjet that I wanted to mention about this effort. And I will talk, in more detail these Upjet changes that we are planning to introduce. Another important work item is, this is also an ongoing one. We are trying to bump the underlying Terraform provider version in provider AWS to version 5.50.0. There's an open PR regarding this. You can see that PR, when you click on this link. But the important thing to mention is, there's currently a blocker for this. In one of the previous PRs, we had to bump the AWS SDK Go version. And, this resulted in the cluster out resource being broken in certain provider configurations. We need to resolve this issue. So previously we resolved this issue with a workaround, by pinning the dependency version. We need to solve this issue, implement as well resource using the new versions of the SDK to unblock the underlying provider version bump. So that's also an issue that we recently opened. Any questions that you'd like to discuss regarding the provider updates? Thank you. So let me move to the Upjet updates. So we have recently deprecated config reference type in favor of config reference Terraform name. So we have been enforcing this for a long while in the PRs, but for some reason we had not deprecated it. But when we started supporting generating multi-version CRDs with Upjet, this became more important for us because the Terraform name configuration API is more robust when compared to the type, because when you specify the type, you need to specify the canonical package of the type, which includes the kind name and also the package version. But if you are dealing with multiple versions, then this means that you also need to maintain the fact that you specify like that. So when you specify the reference type by a Terraform name, all these complexities are automatically handled by Upjet. That's why we have deprecated type in favor of Terraform name. And we have replaced all the usages of this reference type with reference with telephone name network option providers, including provider AWS. We prioritize this item because of this singletons to embedded object conversion, because when we are generating when we're converting singletons in our APIs, we are generating the EV1 beta 2 versions or the new versions of the managed resource APIs, in order to not to break the old clients for backwards compatibility. This type to telephone name conversion becomes more important in complex, and it was time to deprecate it. And if you are maintaining object-based providers, we also recommend you, to change your, reference type usages with reference telephone name. Apart from that, as the second item, we have added support for, specifying, the previous versions of MR APIs that have already been generated. So, we can configure only one version currently in object to generate. This was done to keep things simple in the object code generation pipeline, and also especially for larger providers like provider Azure, provider AWS. It takes quite a long time to generate all the managed resource APIs, and if we start generating multiple versions of them, things will get just worse. That's the reason we are just generating, the configured latest version of the managed resource APIs. But because of the way this code generation pipeline is designed, this may result in collisions with generated type names. And we were previously dealing with, such collisions using a config resource override field names, configuration API, which basically allows you to override the generated field name for the specific type in a managed resource API. But this required us to do lots of manual work. So previously, the surface of the API changes that we did were not large, and we could do this, we could configure individual resources via the override field names APIs. But with the singletons to embedded object conversion, the surface area of the changes is quite large, because tons of resources had embedded, had singleton lists in the APIs, and we had to convert them, and configuring them one by one via override field names becomes quickly a nightmare. So we implemented some logic here, and we provide a new API through which you can configure the already generated older API version on update. We will automatically load them and resolve the type conflict that are caused by generating multiple versions of CRDs automatically by itself. So I don't expect folks to have used this, by the way. But if you start using multiple versions CRDs, you can use the new previous static versions configuration API configure the previous versions of generated MR APIs. There is quite a lot of work that we need to still do in the object code generation pipelines. And this is just, we are just getting started to implement these changes. So as a third item, we have also added the capability to, to specify the managed resource or the CRD API versions that the controller will, watch and reconcile. So previously, object generated controllers were just reconciling. We were able to reconcile the latest version, the last generated version. But with this change, it becomes possible for object to generate V1 booking the CRD that is the associated control will be reconciling, watching the V1 beta 1. So why we did implement this change is, it's sometimes simpler for a controller to watch and reconcile an older version of the API. And in those cases, there is no need to complicate the controller's runtime, what the controller does to do the reconciliation. And for such resources, if you have such a situation, then it's now possible to configure, the resource reconcilers, the controllers, to use an older version of the CRD. So, as I mentioned previously, we have also merged the PR, to facilitate converting the manual manifests. If you need to do this, please take a look at, the Azure link that I have, shown previously, and also the PR that introduces the library here. Another important thing that we would like to discuss is, up to now, Upjet does not generate, secret references for sensitive parameters under spectral unit provider. So Upjet only generates, secret references for sensitive parameters under spec for provider. But we have encountered a use case where, having this would simplify things and would enable certain other scenarios. And honestly speaking, there's no specific reason that we don't do this. We already generate, other parameters that are not sensitive under spectral unit providers. So these sensitive, for sensitive parameters, the secret references will just add because, it adds complexity to the implementation. But as I mentioned, we are trying to introduce the user.mq resource, and there's an associated broker.mq resource, and because of the way the Terraform resource has been implemented, this kind of the race condition between these two controllers. And speculative providers is Crossplane's models answer to this. One of the ways that we can accomplish to resolve this race condition between two controllers is to declare broker users in the broker instance under speculative providers, so that they will just be ignored during the update and deletion, during the rest of the life cycle. So that's basically the idea. But currently, the limitation in Upjet that I mentioned prevents this. We cannot use speculative provider to define broker users because, when you are defining the broker user, you need to specify a password for it. And a password is a sensitive piece of information that's stored in a parameter secret. And since we are not generating references under speculative provider, that use case is not implementable in Upjet-based resources. So basically, we are removing this limitation in Upjet, and when you consume this version of Upjet, you will see, apart from a bunch of other things, that you will now have secret references generated for sensitive information. And yet another improvement that we are planning to introduce in Upjet is we would like to extend, the way you configure the latent initialization in Upjet, and there are already a bunch of, customizations, that you can make in the latent initialization behavior, certain fields, in many of those APIs. And what we are going to add is we are going to add a configuration option so that you can disable latent initialization for provider field if and only the corresponding spec that unit provider field is set. This means that, if you specify a specific field in spec that unit provider, then the spec code provider field won't be late initialized. However, if you don't set it under spec that unit provider, then we will be able to still late initialize the spec code provider field. Again, this was required with the use cases that you are trying to implement into that user resource. This is also one of the things that we would like to discuss. So in my opinion, we should generalize this. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense to late initialize a spec for provider field if the corresponding spec that in provider field has been specified. So in the original design, this was overlooked. The original design relates to the observable resources. There's a specific use case, which is the basic reason this spec unit provider was introduced, and it's again resolving conflicts and race conditions between external controllers and the resource controllers that the Crossplane provider is running. But in that specific case, late initialization was not an issue. But it turns out that, in order to resolve the race condition between local.mq and user MQ, late initialization becomes an issue. So one workaround would be just to, always disable late initialization, for spec for provider user, field in local.mq resource. However, this would result in a backwards incompatible change. That's why we are planning to, have support for this use case and, make this configurable, the latent integration behavior configurable in this regard. And, so we have initiated a, very important task. So we have been hearing from the community and we have been feeling, the pain in the community, when they're trying to add and generate new providers based on Upjet. It has been quite a while since we did not, maintain the related provider generation documentation, including the template repository, etc. And since you folks are also maintaining your own provider, I'd like to also hear about your experience. How difficult or how easy hopefully it was for you to figure your way out using Upjet. But we definitely need improvements here, and we have started improving our documentation, and this will be quite a long task for us, an ongoing work stream. And Fatih has started by adding a new resource configuration guide in the Upjet repository. Thanks, Fatih, for this very important contribution. As I mentioned, there will be many follow-ups, subtasks related to this one. And regarding Uptest, we have an ongoing work stream for converting Uptest's runtime, which is currently based on Cattle, to switch to Chainsaw. And Sagan has already opened the PR; it's under review, and you can see, this is the first Uptest run. The first successful Uptest run, which utilizes the Chainsaw, as the underlying test tool, test. So these are the updates that we wanted to share. Any questions, any further discussion points? We can continue.
Actually, maybe, I do have a quick question. It's more about I did see, I think, an issue on GitHub about that, but more about how to, is there any plan to horizontally scale Upjet or providers in general in Crossplane, or is it or mostly staying on the vertical scaling for now?
Yeah. So we had these discussions, especially in official providers. Previously, we were reconciling resources via the Terraform CLI, and it involved many process forks. One of the options that we discussed back then was this horizontal scaling approach. So with horizontal scaling, I assume you are meaning that we can run multiple pods of a provider, right?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
sharding.
So
Something like that, yeah.
yeah. So the main issue there was we would not like multiple controllers reconciling on the same provider, and we would need a way to shard the managed resource instances across providers, right? So instead of following that approach, we changed the runtime architecture. We switched to a much more scalable one. To the best of my knowledge, I haven't been following those discussions. If there are new discussions under the relevant issue, I haven't been following them personally. But at least it's not in the scope of what currently our team. So have you seen any recent discussions going on? Maybe you can also include the issue that you are referring to. All features, I think some
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part of what you said.
Sorry. So I was saying, like, if you're seeing some recent discussions in an open issue, maybe you can share the link to that issue in this document, and, so that it will be more visible for us.
Yeah, I think it was actually more a Slack discussion that I started.
Okay.
I think I would have to look again. I'll try to find it. If I do find the GitHub, I'll link it in the document. But I'm not sure. It's been a while.
Okay. Thanks for bringing that up.
And so yeah, other than that, I guess there was the points at the top. Yeah, I don't know if that was the next.
Yeah. So
basically the second point there, which is the performance issue with lots of MRs. It's something we've been seeing in our production environment with the Azure provider. It's as soon as we hit over 1,000, well, actually even with just a few, it's just that it's less noticeable because there's less. But when we hit over 1,000 MRs, and right now we're testing in our dev environment with like 8,000 resources, we're seeing that it takes a long time just to get things synced and ready. Even the reconcile loops, even just restarting the providers, it restarts the whole queue, and so it starts again. And it's taking like over, I think for the 8,000 resources, it was taking over almost an hour, if I'm not mistaken. And even with 200 reconcile in parallel, it seems to take a long time.
So it takes a long time, to reconcile them, like, to have them sync to condition, for example, or to provision the resources. So what do you measure there?
Yeah, well, basically the whole, like anything, it just takes a long time in general. We're not sure exactly where it's jamming, because we're not seeing a lot of CPU usage. The RAM usage is very stable and it's not that high. It's like with 8,000 resources, it's less than 1 gig of RAM, which is not too bad, honestly. And in the logs, we're not seeing anything jamming or whatnot. And it's just taking a long time. We don't see any errors. We're trying to figure out, we did enable the metrics, and we're trying to figure out if it's like the external API taking a long time to respond.
Okay.
But it doesn't seem like it's that. We're really not sure. It's really hard to debug because we don't know the internals of how Upjet works. But yeah.
So an important thing is, on which version of the provider are you in?
So yeah, that's kind of related to the third point. We're still on 0.42.2, and the reason is that when we move to 1.0, we're seeing a pretty big problem with syncing. I'll try to post a screenshot in the chat if I'm able. Let me just try to do that right now. But yeah, when we upgrade to 1.0 or higher, we're seeing that it's just, even if everything is synced and ready, it starts dropping the synced on all the resources, on the managed identities and on federated identity credentials. That's the main ones we use with high scale. So yeah, we're seeing just the synced turn to false on all resources continuously. The readiness
And
is,
what's the reported error? You know, when you see sync being set to false, you should also see an error message.
yeah, and the
status
logs,
context.
exactly. We do see context deadline exceeded.
Oh, okay.
But we're not seeing the rate limiting error on the resources itself. So I'm not sure if it's actual rate limiting from Azure or if it's just maybe the timeouts have been changed in Upjet since, I don't know. I don't know if something has been changed in the timeouts somewhere, but we're seeing context deadline exceeded.
Okay, so I think there's already an open issue on this, right?
Yeah, exactly. I open an issue with hopefully enough details, maybe not.
Okay.
So yeah, you can see the graphics right there. Yeah, you can see the synced is just dropping radically and it's not really going up. It does go up a little bit and then it goes down again. And I've tried even over a whole weekend, it just keeps going up and down, up and down, up and down, and it doesn't stay stable. So there's something weird going on, but I'm not sure exactly what the problem is.
Okay, so you have included some logs here, I guess, right?
Yeah, you can see
I see this context deadline exceeded. So, you know, we need to triage this issue. But one thing that's related to this that I'd like to mention is, like, you know, by default, we use what we call as a infinite reconciler in Upjet-based providers, which means that, like, you know, the resource is not reconciled in a synchronous way, but it's reconciled by a go routine started from the main reconciliation. And because of this reason, normally, even if it takes a long time to reconcile the resource, actually, you know, do the actual reconciliation. I mean, you know, call the external resource API, read their responses back, etc., all done in an asynchronous way. And, you know, the context deadline exceeded error message here is quite suspicious. So, of course, we need to check the details on what's going on here. And, you know, I already see the resource kind here, this user defined identity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
we're also seeing it on federated identity credentials as well. Yeah.
Yeah, federated identity. You are also, did you also mention that resource? Okay, so you already mentioned it here. Thanks for that. And my proposal would be, like, you know, to update your agent provider to the latest version regarding the performance update. So I need to check whether we get rolled out the architecture changes with the version that, you know, the current version that you are using. Do you know whether, you know, is it reconciling using the Telecom CLI? Is the provider, Azure provider that you are using currently?
I think it's using already the no fork
Okay.
architecture. So I was hoping that it would help, but no, apparently it's still the same issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, regarding the performance issues that you observed, since you mentioned that, you know, the CPU usage is stable and the memory usage is stable, there are a bunch of provider parameters that you can tweak. Like, you know, you can configure the reconcile periods, and also you can configure the maximum number of concurrent reconcilers that you can use.
Yeah, we
So
did.
Are you aware of those parameters, by the way?
Yeah, we did change the maximum reconcile rate to 200, but the thing is, we don't want to go too high because then we would hit some rate limiting from Azure.
Yeah.
So we're trying to be careful on that part, and we did increase the poll rate and the sync rate, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not exactly sure which one does what, because it feels like kind of the same thing. They're always like, it's always querying Azure in all the times, right?
Yeah, so the poll periods, let's assume there is no change detected by the provider. So as you know, we do drift detection, and let's assume there is no change detected. We automatically reconcile their managed resource again after a poll period, after a configured poll period. Sync period is something related to the Kubernetes controller runtime internals, like every sync period, whether there's an update to the managed resource or not, we receive reconciliation events on the provider side. So sync period is, if I'm not mistaken, it's configured to something like 1 hour. So every 1 hour, even if there is no update, in order to make sure that we don't miss any update events, every reconcile
Okay,
so let's say that way. So the parameter that you are more interested in the poll period. But if you decrease the poll period, then you will more frequently reconcile the resources, even if there are no updates.
Yeah, we had to increase it quite a bit, because if we didn't increase it with 8,000 resources, it wouldn't have time to finish the whole queue before the next poll period, and so the queue would never finish. So we increased it.
So you are already aware of the new metrics that we introduced, and you can read more about them from last week's what I would suggest is, since my understanding is you are not fully utilizing the CPU and memory resources that you have. So in order to utilize them, you need to increase the maximum concurrent reconcilers, and also we can decrease the poll period. So, but I think what's more relevant in your case is increasing the concurrent reconcilers, right? And if you are worried about the Azure quotas, like API quotas, then you need to increase them. And if you'd like to get these things done, then you need to increase also the quotas. So I'm not sure if this is really related to the performance. Like previously in the performance issues that we were struggling with and with the factory, so we were seeing very high CPU utilization, and also we were seeing really high memory utilizations in the CLI based runtime architecture. But if you are not seeing such high utilizations, either memory or CPU utilizations, then I think in order to have your genetic resources reconcile faster is to have more concurrent workers. So that's what I'm suspecting. So it's important maybe to collect some metrics and try to understand, from those metrics where you are spending time. If you look at last week, you will see that we have also plans. We have also plans to add some new metrics, and one of those metrics is like to know how much time is spent on the external resource side, and whether there was any throttling or not. That would also help in your case. If you're trying to understand whether the Azure API throttled your request or something like that. But if I remember correctly, we already have some metrics in Upjet which record the amount of external time spent. The amount of time spent for external API calls. You can also try to use that metric. And did you open an issue regarding this?
I did open an issue about the performance itself, because I created a thread in Slack, and I think it was what's his name? Jean Duplessis that asked me to just come to the meeting and talk about it.
Okay.
If you want, I can open an issue and we can have a discussion there.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay, sounds good. I'll do that, and I'll link it in the document so that it's at the right place. And so yeah, Jean Duplessis told me that you guys actually test up to like 10,000 managed resources. Do you have any suggestions about like the configuration about the pull rate and the reconcile rate and all that stuff for that kind of scale, or you don't really have that information?
Yeah, so it depends on the types of managed resources that you are reconciling, working with. So the tests that we did are not like benchmarks or something like that. It's specific to a resource you provide in AWS.
Okay.
From the results of those tests, they were mostly done to compare the previous architecture with the new architecture.
Okay.
So what I would suggest in your case is to really increase the concurrent reconcilers. Up to the moment, like you should not be starting CPU, of course, or memory. But my assumption is you will hit some, you will hit the CPU limits faster than you hit the memory limits. And you should see whether there's any improvement, and if Azure starts to throttle your requests, then of course the bottleneck becomes the Azure side. So we need to understand what the bottleneck is, right?
Yeah.
So, and as I mentioned, metrics will also help here. And also, if you pursue this, we may also come up with certain new metrics that will help you and our community members in similar situations. As I mentioned, we already have an ongoing work stream regarding metrics. We are trying to introduce certain new metrics regarding totaling and things like that. So I think we have figured out how to implement that for the AWS side, because we have figured out that AWS already reports that totaling via HTTP headers or something like that. I don't know whether we have investigated how we can implement similar metrics on the Azure side, but I would assume Azure also reports, when it totals requests. I would be surprised, if it was not the case. And we should first try to understand what the bottleneck is.
Yeah.
But from your description of the issue, what I understand, what I feel is, CPU utilization and memory utilization is currently not the bottleneck. So we need to understand why we are not, reconciling the resources as fast as we can.
Yeah.
And generally the answer to that question is because there are too few workers compared to the number of managed resources that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So if the calls to the external resources take too much time, and if there are too few reconcilers, then you will be waiting, for them to respond.
The external API duration metric, we're actually gathering it. I'm just not sure how to visualize it, because I'm not sure I understand what it represents, right? So I'm not sure about the query I should do in Prometheus to visualize it. I don't know if you guys have an example of a graph that uses that metric, or a query or something for Prometheus, because I really don't know how to visualize it.
Yeah, so to the best of my knowledge, there are no readily available dashboards or something like that utilizing that metric. I need to check, but if I remember correctly, it was a histogram metric. Like, it reports you, different frequencies for the intervals, like, in seconds. How much time it takes for an external API call to complete. So it gives you a distribution. If I remember correctly, it should be a histogram metric.
Okay, I'll try to figure that out. Thank you.
So you can see the distribution, like out of 100 requests, let's say 40 of them to 10 seconds restarts or less to complete and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe my last question would be, it's something that we've seen, maybe I mentioned it earlier, but when you restart a provider, it restarts the whole queue, and then it basically contacts the provider, the external provider, for the whole reconcile, which is kind of weird because you've already reconciled all of them. It's just a provider, like a pod restart, and then you're spamming the provider again externally. So I was wondering if maybe, I don't know if you guys have any plan about that, but to have some kind of annotation or something that you could put on the MR to say that it was sync at that time, and then not have to do it again externally, basically until the next pull rate.
Okay, so I mean, I think not in the sense that you're asking for, but Crossplane resource model defines a pause annotation. Are you aware of the pause annotation? So if you put the pause annotation, then reconciliation stops completely. Like it's no longer reconciled. And in your case, if those managed resources, let's say, were already in sync and ready state, have this pause annotation, then a post start would not cause a reconciliation of them. But you would not be able to detect drifts until you remove the pause annotation from them. Okay. And also one other thing that you might be interested in regarding the pause annotation is when the pause annotation is set to true, then sync becomes false. And sync becomes false, but with the proper reasoning that it was set to false because of this pause annotation. So you can distinguish whether something went actually wrong in the reconciliation loop. Let's say we received an error from the external API, whether something went actually wrong, or whether it was not synced because of the pause annotation. So you can differentiate it, but still you will see sync set to false. And another thing that you may look into is, the Crossplane model support management. So we define a bunch of management policies like, observe, latency, live, update, read, and, certain combinations of them that are considered as valid, in Crossplane runtime. And, let's say when you set the management policy, let's say, to just include observe, and what happens is just the resource is observed, but even if a drift is detected or something like that, updates don't occur or deletions don't occur. But in your case, I think you are more interested in the number of API calls that we are making to the Azure side, right?
Yeah,
so even if you set your management policy to observe, then we would be observing that. So pause annotation and seems more relevant here. You can also check.
The pause annotation is only going to pause it, and then when we remove it, it's going to sync it immediately, right?
Yes.
So it's not really helping. Let's say if I want, let's say we do an update to the provider, I'm passing from one version to the other. I don't necessarily want to do the sync right now as soon as the new pod starts. I wanted to do at the next poll.
When is that next poll? I mean, so it's not the provider's job to decide on that. So with an external controller, you can set and remove the pause annotation, to control this.
Yeah. But my point is more that you don't it has to sync obviously the objects locally in Kubernetes, but it doesn't necessarily have to call the external API if it hasn't been let's say the poll, let's say the last time we synced it was at 1 p.m. and our poll rate is 1 hour, so it shouldn't sync before 2 p.m., right? Even if we 1:15.
Yeah, you are talking about something like pause annotation, which has an expiration period. Let's say pause this until this many seconds have passed, or this we have
like where the provider was at last time before it was killed or before it was restarted. It's just like saving your sync of where you were at in your sync.
Yeah, I see your point. What I would suggest for you is to open an issue in upstream Crossplane, because what you described is relevant to all the Crossplane providers in the ecosystem. So it will be an extension to the Crossplane report model, and the proper place to discuss is the upstream Crossplane community. And we can discuss certain things there. So what helps in this situation is the rate limiters in place for Crossplane runtime based Crossplane providers, which basically all the providers in the wild are based on Crossplane runtime to the best of and Crossplane runtime has provides some rate limiters for the provider to use. What the rate limiter does is it limits on the number of managed resources reconciled, that will be reconciled in a given interval, let's say. So instead of trying to reconcile them all at once, so a provider restart is a synchronization point, right? So when the provider is restarted, suddenly we have, let's say, 8,000 managed resources that need to be reconciled, and we don't try to reconcile them all at once. The max reconcilers, I don't know. Let me check the name of the parameter there. I don't want to use the wrong name. Let's visit one of the providers here.
Yeah, there's like 3 options.
Yeah, it's the max reconcile rate. This max reconcile rate parameter also controls the parameters of this rate limiter. So if you increase max reconcile rate, it means that the rate limiter will be properly less, and if you decrease max reconcile rate, it will be properly more. But of course, it's controlled. The rate limiter. Still, we need to reconcile, all those resources, right? So if you are asking something for different, you are asking for something different, it's currently not available in the Crossplane ecosystem, as I mentioned. But there are some other parameters, that are related, let's say. I think you are already aware of these parameters, right? But you're done. You're already your homework.
All right, cool. Sounds good. I'll create an issue. I'll create 2 issues actually. So one for the suggestion and the other one for the performance issue, and then we can discuss over there. And then the last thing, I had the little PR at the last link in the last point there. It's just a super simple PR, basically, because we reference the provider Azure code so that we can use the resources in our code directly. And it's basically just changing the way you reference that library, because it was changed to use the Go mod before it wasn't using. So it's a very simple change. I've done it in the Upjet repo and as well in the Azure repo, because it's also referencing it. Anyways, it's not super urgent. It's just something that it's basically forcing us to reference it in the old way, unless we do a replace directive and all that stuff, which is so it's just a small improvement for the future. Just as an FYI.
Okay, you also mentioned the motivations here, right?
Yeah, everything is in that issue. So it's nothing major. It's just.
Thanks for bringing that.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks for bringing that.
All right, thank you so much for the answers.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thanks for joining the meeting and having some conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Then I think, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to
thank
meet
you.
And I think we are done, and thanks for joining the meeting. See you next time.
All right, thank you. Have
Bye.
a good
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Thank you.